Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hey, really glad you're with us for the Monday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. And we promise you there's not a format change on the podcast. The Thursday and Friday episodes were all essentially on the same topic. We had OJ and then the cost of higher education. And today, which should come as no surprise, we're going to be wall-to-wall on the Iranian attacks on Israel over the weekend. That is not the plan, is to go single topic every day, but we take what the news cycle gives us. And this weekend, boy, they gave us a lot, right, Jim?
Yeah, dear listeners, if you're upset with this, I really pushed Greg on the Jets' new uniforms. And I believe that they belonged as the good martini. Very classic, going back to the 1980s, same helmet logo and all that. But apparently, what's going on with actual Israeli Jets is a bigger deal than what's going on with the New York Jets, and I really can't begrudge that news judgment. So, some other day, maybe draft
That's
day.
Jim's take in April. Wait till September, and then it's going to be kind of, it's going to half of 1/6.
Well, the uniforms,
right,
the uniforms have been the second worst thing about the team for the past couple of years.
That's all right. So we're going to be looking more like Freeman McNeil and Al Toon now?
Good names.
Okay.
Good, yes, there you go.
All right, well, let's get on to what happened, because we had heard as the week went on last week that Iran was planning a response to the Israeli strike on the Iranian ambassador's residence in Syria, which killed the head of Palestinian Islamic Jihad, or at least one of their top officials, as well as an Iranian general who, as we now know in more detail, was up to his neck in the 10/7 Hamas attacks on Israel. And it was just a matter of what it would look like and when exactly it would happen. At first, the Iranians and their proxies seized a cargo vessel in the Red Sea with certain ties to Israel, and some thought, well, that might be it. That was not it. Saturday afternoon, we received word that the Iranians were planning to send drones and a whole lot of missiles towards Israel. And so, Jim, you chronicled this very well in the Morning Jolt today. 170 drones, more than 30 cruise missiles, more than 120 ballistic missiles at Israel on Saturday. And we'll get into this in more detail in the Good Martini, which is coming next. And that's that the missile defense system worked spectacularly well. But what we know here now is, A, that Iran thought that sending that many missiles towards Israel was a legitimate response to what happened in Syria, despite all of their mischief towards our own troops and everything else since 10/7, including their involvement in that too. And then there's also this curious kind of in-between, the Turks apparently acting as intermediaries between the U.S. and Iran, with the U.S. telling the Turks to tell Iran that any action that the Iranians take needs to be within certain limits. And so that has some wondering whether Iran expected all of their missiles to be blown up by the Iron Dome and other missile defense technologies or not. But nonetheless, Iran definitely capable of inflicting a tremendous amount of damage here in this attack. And so just because it didn't work doesn't mean it wasn't incredibly sinister.
No, absolutely. And for anyone wondering, well, why is this happening now? Why is this different? Back on April 1st, Israel struck the Iranian diplomatic compound, embassy, consulate, whatever you prefer to call it, in Damascus, Syria, and killed a bunch of leaders of the Quds Force, part of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps. High-level guys. This is the same outfit that Soleimani was in charge of, the guy that Trump turned into a red smear on the side of the road back in 2020, when everybody thought, oh, Trump is going to start a war with Iran. That's the worst thing that's going to happen in the year 2020. Things turned out very differently from that. But this was seen as some sort of great provocation on the part of the Israelis, or at least that's what the Iranians were claiming. Now, as you and I talked about at the time, Greg, my attitude is like, look, you should respect the diplomatic territory and embassies of every single country on this planet, except one. Sorry, we don't respect. I don't think anybody should respect Iran's. They didn't respect ours back in 1979, and I don't think the Iranians have much of a leg to stand on, perhaps in some cases literally, when it comes to, oh, how dare someone attack one of our diplomatic facilities. Secondly, it's very clear they were using this for planning terrorist attacks. And if you really thought, the Israelis won't strike us here, we're in an embassy. Israelis, these guys are known for the gentle touch and never going outside the lines to hit the Iranians or any of their enemies or something like that. Everybody knows the Israelis are a bunch of nice guys. So they were always playing with fire and whistling past the graveyard thinking that they would be protected because of the diplomatic status, and it turned out to be a literal graveyard by the time Israel was done with that facility. So, Iran's been saying, we're going to get you. We're going to come. We're going to get you. U.S. intelligence has confirmed. Biden, on Friday, after speaking to the National Action Network, good old Al Sharpton's group, was speaking off the cuff and said, Mr. President, when do you expect it to happen? And he's like, sooner rather than later. And Mr. President, what is your message to the Iranians? Don't. And I know this, by the way, was the same don't that he did to the Houthis right before they started firing lots of missiles at ships in the Red Sea. Very similar to the don't message he sent to the Iranian proxy groups, ended up killing 3 of our guys in Jordan. And it's very similar to the message he sent to Putin as he was building up forces on the border of Ukraine. Don't. Somebody pointed out to me also, it's not that far from Kamala Harris's don't come message to the migrants. They're 0 for 5 in all of those examples that I listed. I know it's going to shock you, but it turns out one of my readers pointed out, don't doesn't work on toddlers. Why do you think this is going to work on rogue states? But unsurprisingly, that was not a sufficient deterrent. And so what made this one different is that traditionally Iran has used proxy groups like the Houthis, like Hamas, like Hezbollah. This was the first time they've launched it from their own soil. And this is kind of we want you to know this is coming from us. This is our, no doubt the Iranians feel insulted. No doubt the Iranians feel they need to show some sort of demonstration of retaliation. All over this morning, Greg, I was seeing people saying, well, it was a strike, but it was mostly symbolic. In fact, you look at it, how much they telegraphed it. This was an attack designed to fail. Horse pucky. And I was really tempted to not say pucky. When you launch that many projectiles, you're trying to kill people. Don't pretend that this is, because if you want, you can fire them into the ocean. You can fire them, up into a mountain range. There are ways you can, send purely symbolic attacks. That was not a purely symbolic attack. Could the Iranians expect that the Israeli Iron Dome was probably going to knock down most of these? Yes. But even the best defenders of the Iron Dome system will say it works about 90% of the time, which is great for air defense. Like, you got 100 projectiles coming at you and it shoots down 90. Great. But that still leaves 10. And for those wondering, and I felt like the need to put this into the physical comparison, because people have this idea, and they might have an idea of they might be envisioning the kind of missiles shot from planes and stuff like that. The drones are the size of a man. They are a good 6 feet, 7 feet long, right? So they are big. Now imagine they got that. They got explosives in the tip. They land. They're going to make a huge explosion. The ballistic missiles and the cruise missiles, they're all 7 meters long. These things are huge. And so all of these things, just imagine if it didn't have any explosives, that just a big, heavy thing landing on the roof of your building is going to crush a lot of people. But of course, these things do have explosives. They are designed to explode on impact. So I don't understand the mentality where Iran can throw 300 of these things. And you can say, it wasn't that bad, or this is mostly, no, it's not symbolic. It was real. And let's point out, and maybe I'm foreshadowing a little bit of our next martini, but so apparently a significant portion of them did not successfully launch or fell well short of their targets, misfired, things like that. On the one hand, that's good news. It suggests that the Iranian ballistic missile program and all their weapons are not quite, next time buy American, that these guys have, kind of cut some corners, and maybe they aren't, you ever bought some discount electronics? Maybe it didn't work as well as you hoped. Maybe that's what they've got the equivalent of in their missile programs, which is good for their potential victims. But still, as you said, I don't think you get any mercy points for having lousy weapons. That's not saying, these guys wanted to kill more people. They just didn't have the right kind of weapons to do it. And also, it took Iron Dome and the U.S. and the U.K. and the Jordanians to do as much as they did. And even then, there were some did get through. So this is a big escalation. And this is a big step of, the headline of today's Jolt is the regional war is already here. I was kind of struck by how often, and you still see, I almost feel like sometimes people's perception of the situation is on autopilot. Warning that this could be heading towards a regional confrontation. This is a regional confrontation. What else do you need to see to say, we've got, Iranian proxy groups all over the Middle East and Iran. And we've got Israel and basically all of their allies that had to put together kind of this whole Avengers-style team up to put layer upon layer of air defense to prevent so many of these missiles and drones from coming through. So this is a really big confrontation. I think it is very clear that Iran feels like they have been escalating each step of the way, and we'll talk a bit more about this in our third martini. But there is no sign they feel particularly deterred. There is no sign that they feel like they have to, step more lightly, or that they fear the consequences of taking these sorts of actions, hitting Israel, hitting U.S. targets, hitting anybody else who happens to be in their way.
If the reports are accurate, what do you make of the Biden administration telling the Turks to tell the Iranians, hey, make sure whatever you do is within these limits?
Look, Ayatollah, you can kill some Jews, but don't kill too many Jews, is what we're trying to say here. Okay, I'm paraphrasing, but like that is effectively what the U.S. position has turned into. That we are willing to accept some. Now, here's the thing: if you want to say, look, when Israel kills because after we killed Soleimani, Iran fired lots of missiles, and I believe they shot down a passenger airliner that had a bunch of Canadians on it. We know they're going to retaliate. Accepting that the retaliation is extremely likely really should not ever go beyond that point of saying, well, then here's our permission slip. Here's our recognition that, okay, well, we know you're going to do something, so just don't make it too bad. I think the inverse of that is to say, look, it's clearly you're going to do something. Tread lightly or act carefully, because if you end up killing lots of civilians or something like that, that's when our counter move is going to be even worse. Like that, there's that approach. But the idea of, we accept it, and through the Turks, we're going to communicate, the acceptable parameters of a response, effectively amounts to an administration saying, okay, we know we're going to make this whole big thing about don't do this, but we know you're going to do this, so we will accept it if it happens within this range. And you just got to know, what was the acceptable range of casualties?
And like your friend said, you can't just say don't. You have to say don't or else fill in the blank. This is what's going to happen as your consequence.
Yeah, even if you don't want to tip your hand on all of your consequences, you should have some idea. Make the lights flicker in Tehran. Something like that, just to send them, say, oh, hey, we can hit you in ways you don't even know about when we want to.
But there's been no consequences. You talk about token responses. It's what we did after Iran killed our guys through their proxies. I mean, we bombed like some abandoned ammo depot somewhere that they used. That's not exactly a massive deterrent. 4 Patriots. You can find them at 4patriots.com/martini. The big thing going on over there right now, the return of the deluxe 3-month survival food kits. They are back in stock after being sold out for more than a year. These kits will give you 688 total servings, or about 8 per day, and it gives you about 1,500 calories per day. Plus, the recipes are even better now. Pancakes, mac and cheese, Aztec chili, potato soup, spaghetti, lasagna, and more. More than 200,000 smart Americans agree this is survival food that tastes good. 100% satisfaction guaranteed. So be ready. Also, don't forget about the soon-to-be expiring deals on the Patriot Pure line of products, the UV phone sanitizer, the UV wand, the sanitation solution machine, and the disinfecting power bank. You can stash food away and be confident that when a disaster strikes, you and your family will be ready. Go to 4patriots.com/martini to get the deluxe 3-month survival food kit and the peace of mind you deserve. Plus, get free shipping on orders over $97. That's the number 4patriots.com/martini. That's 4patriots.com/martini. All right, Jim, on to the second martini now, and we did talk about it to a decent extent in the first martini, so this might be a shorter one, but the collaboration and coordination among the U.S., Israel, the U.K., some reports have seen France, others say no, the Jordanians certainly, and the Saudis even played a role in protecting Israel from this Iranian strike, and of course the Saudis and the Iranians, there's no love lost there. They certainly see Iran as the biggest threat in the region if you're in Riyadh. I guess the fact that this was telegraphed to some extent helped them to be prepared for it, but U.S. Central Command clearly playing a leading role here and with some of our critical allies inside and outside of the region. And so this was a tremendous success. This was not easily done. And so for the U.S. to lead this effort, some credit certainly belongs with the Biden administration, certainly the those executing the defense in the Middle East, and as well as our friends in the region. So I think if there's going to be a good martini that comes out of what happened over the weekend, the fact that we were ready and worked so well together to basically knock down all of these things, pretty impressive.
Greg, if you'd said to me, Iran is going to launch 300 projectiles, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and drones at Israel, how many people do you think are going to die? My guess would be, at minimum dozens. That this was going to, and the idea that at this point, I believe it was just one 7-year-old girl who was struck by debris. We should point out, like when you're shooting down these things, it's not like they get vaporized. That inevitably there is something, debris, shrapnel, something's going down and hit the ground. The good thing about this part of the world is a lot of desert, and there's a good chance that it will hit nothing, but there's always a chance that there are human beings below wherever these debris and shrapnel is coming down, and that's what happened in the case of this poor young girl. So last I heard, she was still hospitalized. Apparently one of the Israeli air defense bases was lightly damaged, nothing that can't be fixed, which is really about that's almost near miraculous. And I think, I heard someone, there was a really remarkable video. It's, I guess, the Dome of the Rock out in Jerusalem. And you can see the dome at the bottom of the screen. And above it, you can see these lights in the sky coming in. And then you see other things coming in. And they, one by one, they all make a flash. And they all kind of disappear. It looks like 3 or 4 of them all in sequence. And I saw somebody saying, boy, the Muslim world is, what are they going to think of seeing the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, their third holiest place after Mecca and Medina, under attack by the Iranians? I would love to believe that the Muslim world will turn against Iran and the mullahs, after seeing that. I don't think they will. I think, unfortunately, there's an enormous amount of cognitive dissonance. I keep saying cognitive dissonance. Apparently, it's cognitive dissonance. Apparently, I have a cognitive problem in how to pronounce that word. But the idea that people have decided that that Iran is on their side, even though they're constantly blowing up Muslims with their suicide bombers, and even though they're constantly, Muslims are the ones who pay the harshest price for Islamic extremism in many cases. So you would look at this and you'd say, okay, apparently every Arab state is privately rooting for us, and every Arab state can't stand Iran and sees them as a major threat to their interests and to their territory, as they should. A lot of Arab regimes feel obligated to say, oh, this is terrible, Israel, how dare you, and to, play up the, Israel is the root of all evil card. Jordan apparently issued a statement insisting, look, we're only hitting the drones that were going over our territory. And we were only doing it because it was it's a violation of our airspace. That's the real crime here. Never mind that these things are flying over to try to kill. It's not the killing of Israelis we have a problem with. It's not asking our permission for our airspace. That's not. I'm paraphrasing, but that was the gist. Because unfortunately, as wonderful a country as Jordan is, I enjoyed my visit there, and the people there are very friendly. The overwhelming majority of Jordanian public opinion is anti-Israeli, and they do not like it when the kingdom, takes steps to protect the Israelis. On the other hand, I think Jordan saw a way to, that they were not going to sit by and sit on their hands as Iran decided to launch all these missiles and rockets and drones over their airspace. So you add it all up. I mean, you could see the outlines of a broader coalition against Iran that could grow out of this. I am a little skeptical. I don't, just because it's the Middle East and you just should not count on things going right. And maybe kind of force, in our third martini, we'll talk about why I just don't have a feeling things are going to go better from here on out. But all in all, the fact that, we're talking about no deaths after such a massive barrage from the Iranians really does feel like something miraculous.
No, absolutely right. And again, kudos to those who executed the defense. You know who else deserves a huge thank you here? Ronald Reagan, who 40 years ago had championed the idea of missile defense, and he was laughed off as pursuing some sort of pie-in-the-sky Star Wars. Remember, everybody branded it as Star Wars because it was this fantasy that he might have picked up from some movie somewhere. Well, over those 40 years, we improved this technology. We had Patriot missiles in the Gulf War. There's Patriot missiles being used right now in at least the Ukraine war. And over time, this has gotten better and better and better. And everybody who laughed at Ronald Reagan, who not only championed technology that's being used right now, but in the postmortem of the Cold War, his refusal to scrap SDI is the reason that the Russians spent themselves into bankruptcy and had to fold. So huge wins all over the place.
Just to think about how technology changes war, and we are witnessing it change right now. So when Reagan proposed that, there really wasn't any, air defense systems were primitive compared to today. 1991, Saddam starts sending Scuds towards Israel, and the U.S. starts deploying the Patriot missiles. But I think everyone recognizes the effectiveness of the Patriots back in 1991 was not quite as great as the administration made it sound back then. They went back and had a much higher miss rate than they like to acknowledge. Now you look at this, and I was thinking about, listeners have heard my experience about being in Kyiv, and they launched 31 missiles, 29 cruise, 2 ballistic, and 31 for 31. I mean, just how amazing that is, and how different lots of cities all across Ukraine and obviously in Israel and a lot of these places would look if they didn't have air defense functioning the way it is. We may be, just think about how you feel as an Iranian air attack commander right now. Your weapons don't work. Everything just became obsolete because like you're hoping that yours is one of the 10 that gets through an Iron Dome system. So look, we don't live in a perfectly safe world. We live in a much safer world than we did thanks to that technology, which as you acknowledge, as you said, a lot of it came out of SDI. Vindicated
once again. All right, Jim. So, of course, the question now that thankfully the Iranian missile barrage was successfully deterred, and hopefully that young girl is going to be okay. What now? After being the target of so many missiles and drones, you would think that the Israelis are probably planning a response, and I assume that they are. But according to Axios, President Biden has told Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that the U.S. will not support any Israeli counterattack against Iran. Biden and his senior advisors are highly concerned an Israeli response to Iran's attack on Israel would lead to a regional war with catastrophic consequences. Biden told Netanyahu, quote, "You got a win, take the win." The win being that the Iranian attack was not as successful, obviously, as Iran had hoped and was really knocked down pretty much altogether. But just because somebody shot a lot at you and it didn't work doesn't mean that they get away with it. The UN, of course, as always, is calling for maximum restraint right after Israel gets attacked. It says the Middle East is on the brink, danger of a devastating full-scale conflict.
A full-scale conflict? Wow, you're saying they could fire more than 300 projectiles?
Right. So basically, the U.S. does its part to help protect Israel, and then the immediate reaction is, I don't know. No, you can't respond.
Yeah.
What do you think?
The metaphor I kept seeing this morning was people saying, well, look, your bulletproof vest worked, so you got to let the guy with the gun run away. Take that win. He shot at you 300 times, and really nothing get through. It's your vest really held, so that's a win for you, and so now you're even. And of course, the Israelis don't see it that way. The Israelis are like, no, we're going to go after the guy who shot at us so many times. This story is not primarily a story about Joe Biden, but I think it's a very big component. And I don't know if you can draw a direct line from Biden's position gradually shifting from, we will stand with Israel as long as it takes, to, bit by bit becoming more and more critical of Israel, abstaining at the United Nations, criticizing Israel's tactics. But I suspect it's very hard to believe this didn't influence the thinking of Iran to say, this is our chance. We can take shots at Israel. Because also Biden criticized the strike on the embassy, wink, wink, over in Damascus too. So from that, the Iranians came to the seemingly reasonable conclusion, okay, there's a wedge between Biden and Israel. This is the time to strike. And I don't think, there are a lot of problems with having an 81-year-old man as president. This way, if we had a young, hale, and hearty president, I don't think that president would say, yes, one of our fiercest enemies, the one that denounces us as the great Satan, that every time they open up their legislature, their attack on Israel is imminent, and we think it's going to be the biggest attack ever. And now I'm going to Rehoboth Beach, which is what happened on Friday after that, don't. Vacation, all I ever want. So and we know Biden goes to Delaware almost every weekend, which I think is a very bad look for him. Well, apparently by like Saturday morning, midday, somebody in the Biden team realized, maybe he shouldn't be in Rehoboth Beach when something like this is going to go down. And he came back to the White House around, sometime on Saturday afternoon. And I believe the attack was going on by Saturday evening. As I wrote in today's Jolt, I get the feeling Joe Biden just desperately wants the world to be quiet for between now and Election Day. And sorry, Mr. President, it's just not going to work that way. Because also, you don't hear Biden talk about Russia, Ukraine very much. You don't hear Biden talk. Biden would like to spend the next 6 months talking about Donald Trump and abortion, and maybe trans youth, maybe book banning. As many social issues as possible. Biden does not want Americans recognizing, I don't say the world's on fire, but you got Russia, Ukraine. You got China saber rattling over Taiwan. You've got the Middle East bursting into flame. International cargo companies can't go through the Red Sea because the Houthis keep, firing missiles. And this is for a guy who spent his first couple months in office saying, America is back, and warning about, I got to be careful because, Donald Trump's going to get us into war with Iran. We had COVID come along, which kind of complicated everybody's plans for the rest of 2020. But after, Iran fired those missiles right after Soleimani's death, they were pretty quiet for the rest of the year. Now, maybe that's COVID. Maybe that's other factors that they had going on there. Understanding that, Iran is one of those countries that would tell you that they only had 3 people die of COVID and everything was fine and their healthcare system worked as. Pay no attention to those mass graves outside our capital city. It's totally normal for us to, So maybe that was a factor in, minimizing the Iranian response to that. But, I mean, who can look at the world right now and say, oh, yeah, America's enemies are on the run, or America's enemies are quaking in their boots? I'd love to be convinced otherwise, but I think we have a doddering old 81, turns 82 right after the election president who is slow-footed, very slow-witted response, bad instincts. We all remember the Robert Gates comment about how he's gotten every major foreign policy decision wrong. He's not getting better with age. Their message to Israel is, well, okay, your air defense worked. That's a win. Don't hit back. Their message to the Ukrainians is, we want you to win the war. Just don't do anything that would destroy any Russian oil refineries because we don't want oil prices to go up. We're always telling our friends they can't hit back. We have no ability to, lo and behold, the doesn't do any good on rogue states or hostile states or terrorist groups like the Houthis or anything like that. Heaven forbid we actually try to deter the bad guys for once. No. We always spend all of our time and energy is spent trying to talk down the good guys who've got every reason to retaliate from attacks like this. So that's why I have a hard time being optimistic. But surprise me, Mr. President. Overcome the limbo stick of my exceptionally low expectations.
Has his charm offensive with Tehran accomplished anything positive? There's plenty of horrible things, from emboldening them to no consequences to constantly looking the other way like a pro wrestling ref. Is there anything positive that's come from this?
Craig, it's almost like we had an Iranian agent setting our Iran policy. But we've heard nothing about that. Like, this guy's been under investigation for security clearance for like a year and change. We heard nothing else about this. Hey, happy Monday, everybody.
What a great way to end this one. So, Jim, have a good Monday. I'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Do subscribe to the podcast if you don't already, and tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch Podcast. Follow us both on X. Jim is at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a great Monday and join us again on Tuesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.